God, we come to you just as we are. Some of us coming so desperate and hungry to believe that such a thing could be true, that we are surrounded by love. And we can't explain, we can't wrap our arms around, but find ourselves having arms wrapped around us. Help us get out of our heads and open ourselves up to your divine flow, which is in this space, which has breathed all of creation into being, which is the very thisness of life, our very ground of being, our highest hope, our strength when we need it most. This is your love. And you have loved us like the greatest loving, nurturing mother possibly could. Unconditionally. There at every turn. Supportive, nurturing. We thank you, God, that you have met us here in this space. Amen. Have a seat. So as we continue on this series, which we're trucking right on through, hopefully this is going to work. Yes, good news. We've been in this 6-part series for a few weeks now. Last week we looked at well-being, wellness. How'd you like Jonathan Foster last week? Yeah, great stuff. If you haven't picked up his book, Indigo, please grab a copy for yourself. And if you know somebody who's struggling with grief or suffering, pick it up for them. I don't know anybody who has read it and not been moved and touched by it. So while we have the copies, get them. They're only $10. You can't beat that. Anyway, dear friend, I heard he dropped an F-bomb after I was gone, so we'll see if we pay him back for those books. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, today we're talking about gracious leadership. This part of these different modalities that we have here. We started this whole thing off talking about the currency of relationship, the currency of truth, wellness. We'll get around to time and place and money. But the whole idea of this thing is being a part of the flow of God, of what is this thing that we're calling God and this movement of God, and thinking about currents of things. Think about a river current or air currents. How can we be in that current? And knowing that we are in that current, how can we do whatever we can to be with that flow? How can we direct that perhaps to places that it may need to flow more? How can we make sure that we're not putting a kink in that flow? Because sometimes we become dams, right? In the flow of the divine work. All of these need to happen in our life. These probably look somewhat similar to you with our own movements here that we talk about quite a bit, that this whole shalom thing we're about. When we look at the life of Jesus, the way that he kept the flow of shalom in his life, he was a lifelong learner. He was committed to service. He stood for grace and justice. He was dedicated to communing with God, and he did it all in community. All these things worked together to facilitate greater shalom in him and gave him opportunity to spread more shalom with everybody else. This one I just want to briefly mention that we have a committee we call the Standing Committee. And it has to do with standing for grace and justice. And so this group has been meeting. We have an app out now. It's a very rough draft. You can find it, just Crosswalk Napa. And there's a particular page on this thing which talks about different opportunities and ways you can get involved. And this is a really important piece of who we are. And there are some events coming up. There's the No Kings thing coming up at the end of March that if any of you want to be a part of that, it's going to be a large event. I'll be opening it up with a blessing over that event. So anyway, that's coming. But standing for things that we know are shalomi is what that whole thing is all about. So know that that's happening. And on that note, I want to bring this up. Reese has done this in the past, and at different community events we do a similar thing. It's a land acknowledgement. The whole nation here, you can't make out much of that, but these are different tribes that once existed all over our nation, indigenous people, long before people who looked like me showed up. And in our own area right here, if you talk to local experts, they'll say that the Wapo, Patwin, and coastal Miwok people lived here 10,000 years ago because it's such a fertile place to be. And they're not here, at least in that kind of strength anymore. And that's because we human beings here in America, we have our own guilt, don't we? We have our own history. We like to point out other countries that have done horrible things like genocide and pushing people out when we ourselves have done this. And so I don't say this to just heap on guilt to us, but maybe to humble us, to realize that we have in our history been capable of horrors, and we still are. American exceptionalism is a myth. We're human beings, the lot of us, trying to do our best. So let's try to do our best. I'm going to look at a different map now because this has to do with the story that we're looking at today. This is a picture of the general area of what we would call Israel. And in blue, you can kind of make out, I know it's not real big. This is part of our learning curve with these cool new sets, is how to make things big enough so you can see them. But there's sort of a darker blue up there, aquaish color. That's what's called the Kingdom of Israel. But at this time in history, Israel was two countries, or the Jewish people occupied two countries. The Kingdom of Israel to the north and the Kingdom of Judah to the south. So that's sort of that, what color would that be? Salmon-y, kind of dark salmon-y color is Judah. That's where Jerusalem is. And that northern Kingdom of Israel, their capital city was Samaria. This region, or at least part of it anyway, came to be known as the area of Samaria where the Samaritans live. Remember that? So Jesus talks about the Good Samaritan. I'll be talking about a story where he goes into Samaria, and that pocket of people were enemies of the Jews. And it went both ways. The Jewish people couldn't stand the Samaritans, and the Samaritans couldn't stand the Jewish people. There's great enmity between those. But this is long before Jesus' time, hundreds and hundreds of years, and we're focusing on a story that deals with the kingdom of Aram Damascus. That's now Syria, just to give you some bearings on this. And Damascus still exists today, and that is still a hot spot today, right? We know that Israel and Syria trade bombings on a regular basis and have for a long, long time. So this story comes from many centuries ago, and it features a guy named Elisha. You're probably very familiar with the name Elijah, who was his predecessor. Elijah was the big dog prophet, and the guy who was to follow him, his name was Elisha. He got the mantle. There's a really cool story on that, which we're not going to get to. But right now, just know that Elisha is the holy man that we're talking about. So let's walk through this thing and see what we got. So one time when the king of Aram, that was that country to the north, was at war with Israel, after consulting with his officers, he said, "At such and such a place, I want an ambush set." Now this gives me a reason to pause and just remind you that anytime we look at a biblical story, I don't care where it is, we need to read it with a different set of eyes than our Western culture has given us. Our Western culture has said when you read anything in the Bible, you need to read it as factually accurate. Believe it, hook, line, and sinker. Don't ask any questions. Whatever you read is exactly what it is. But what do we do with the such and such a place? What do we do with that? Itself is unspecific. We're wanting specificity, and we're not getting it. I want to take one step further and say that the ancient Jewish people, Jesus himself included, and the rabbis around him and before him, whenever they talked about these stories like this, they held on to them loosely. They didn't have a need to read them as if they were historical fact with great specificity. They read them as the stories of their faith, folklore, which doesn't mean that none of this happened, but it's just saying they were very comfortable with just hearing this as a story because there's more than one thing to take away from this story, as we will see. So I just give you the freedom because there are going to be some wacky things that happen in this story, and you're going to be like, "Come on, Pastor Pete, you expect me to buy this stuff?" No, not at all, but I'm asking you to entertain it, because why in the world did they preserve these stories for us? It's for us to mull them over and wonder what is the truth that we're learning here from these people who were dedicated in giving us these stories from so long ago, who were prayerful and serious about them. So anyway, the holy man, this is Elisha, somehow he knew that this ambush was set, so he sent a message to the king of Israel, "Watch out when you're passing this such and such a place, because Aram has sent an ambush there." So the king of Israel sent word concerning the place of which the holy man had warned him. This kind of thing happened all the time, Elisha tipping off Israel and what was going on. Excuse me. The king of Aram was furious over all this. He called his officers together and said, "Tell me, who is leaking information to the king of Israel? Who is the spy in our ranks?" But one of his men said, "No, master, dear king. It's not any of us. It's Elisha, the prophet of Israel. He tells the king of Israel everything you say, even what you whisper in your bedroom, which is really weird, isn't it? What a strange detail. How did they find that out? Right? Was Elisha going around saying, well, you wouldn't believe what he said last night? I mean, it's just, what's going on here? But that's just another thing. All right, we're talking folklore here. That's okay. So the king said, go and find out where he is. I'll send someone and capture him. The report came back. He's in Dothan, which is some distance away from Samaria, the capital city. Then he dispatched horses and chariots, an impressive fighting force. They came by night and surrounded the city. It's not looking good for Elisha. Early in the morning, a servant of the holy man Elisha got up and went out. Surprise! Horses and chariots surrounding the city. And the young man exclaimed, "Oh, master, what shall we do?" And he said, "Don't worry about it. There are more on our side than on their sides." Then Elisha prayed, "Oh God, open my servant's eyes and let him see." The eyes of the young man were opened, and he saw a wonder. The whole mountainside full of horses and chariots of fire surrounding Elisha. Hey, by the way, anybody remember that tune from Chariots of Fire? Can you remember it? Somebody get it going. Da, 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 da. I just couldn't resist. It was too much fun. All right. So chariots of fire surrounding Elisha. What a mind blower, right? When the Arameans attacked, Elisha prayed to God, "Strike these people blind." And God struck them blind, just as Elisha said. Then Elisha called out to them, "Not that way, everybody. Not this city. Follow me." Person you don't know or have never seen and still haven't. "And I'll lead you to the man you're looking for." And Elisha led them into Samaria, right into his own trap that was going to be set. As they entered the city of Samaria, the capital city, which was well armed, Elisha prayed, "Oh God, open their eyes so they can see where they are." And God opened their eyes. They looked around. They were trapped in Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "Father," with a statement of respect, "shall I massacre the lot?" Because that makes sense. I'm serious. That's what you do when your enemies are delivered to you. That's what people do all over the world all the time. Let's wipe them out. Thank you, God, for delivering them right here, right now, made it so easy for us. That's how our world works. So the king is just asking an obvious question, thinking that the answer is obvious. Should I just wipe them down, mow them down? And Elisha says, "Not on your life. You didn't lift a hand to capture them. Now you're going to kill them? No, sir. Make a feast for them and send them back to their master. Give Dixie a call. Have her get her friends together. Let's do it again." So he, the king, prepared a huge feast for them. After they ate and drank their fill, he dismissed them. Then they returned home to their master. The raiding bands of Aram didn't bother Israel anymore. Wow. What a story. There's a lot here that I want to unpack somewhat briefly. Let's talk about more than the literal interpretation here about what's going on. Let's start with these weird premonitions that Elisha had. What do we do with that in our day and age? Do we just chalk that up to, I don't know, it's just some, it's just folklore? This kind of stuff doesn't really happen. But you know what? I want to entertain the idea to some degree that there's an element of truthiness with this reality and this experience. I'm not exactly sure how this worked for Elisha and all that, but I do know in this day and age, there are some things that you don't need much spiritual acumen to be able to, pretty reliably pick the future, right? How many of you are Niners fans? You good people, right? You Niners fans, not too far into the season, most of you were making a very strong prediction about this past football season. After a few significant injuries, you predicted that the San Francisco 49ers would not likely get to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, right? You're amazing. How did you know that? Well, you knew that because there was so much writing on the wall. You would be a way outlier if you thought otherwise. There are all kinds of things like that in our world where it doesn't take rocket science to predict the most probable future thing that's going to happen. So that's going to happen. And we also know that there are, shystery people in the world that prey on people. Come for a reading or whatever. I'm not blowing up the whole thing, but we know that there are some people that aren't exactly honest perhaps, and they know how to work you and me and ask the right questions and say the right things so that it sure seems legit. And if you just give them another $20, they'll tell you, what Uncle Ed had to say, after his death. All these things. And again, I'm not taking away from the whole thing because I think there's some element of stuff that we don't fully understand happening in our world. And I also want to just recognize that we are just learning about how profoundly what kind of profound things our brains are capable of that we haven't figured out until right now. And that's just starting. About ways that we sense things, ways that we are connected to each other and everyone. Quantum science should blow your mind because it's mind-blowing stuff about ways that we're connected that we don't have the capacity to fully understand yet. Remember that shrimp I showed you about a month ago when Tom Ward was here? We get pretty confident about our eyes because we have 3 whole receptors to see reality. And remember that particular shrimp had like 16 receptors and could see all kinds of stuff that we can't and understand stuff? Well, I wonder if there are times when people can sense something in the air because they're sensing something in the air. And it may or may not come true, but their capacity to sense something is there and their experience is real. Again, it's not necessarily predictive, but it wouldn't surprise me if we figure out at some point that we're capable of being in touch. I don't want to get all pluribus with you, the Apple show, but I wonder if there's a little part of that connectivity that we're only beginning to really understand. So I'm open-handed with that stuff. Now let's talk about fiery horses and chariots, because we've all seen fiery horses and chariots, of course. Should we believe in literal fiery horses and chariots for Elisha? Well, for him, whatever that image was, that made total sense for him in his day and age. It communicated exactly what they needed to know, that God was around them and with them, and whatever was going to transpire, they were going to be held by that God who showed up in this crazy display. I don't know that fiery horses and chariots would do a lot for me, and it probably wouldn't do a whole lot for you. But I think it shows up in different ways. I've said it before, and I'll say it again now. We are bombarded with bad news all the time. It's what gets us to click the stories. And the more we click bad news headlines, guess what? The more bad news headlines you're going to get. It is an onslaught of bad news upon bad news upon bad news. But as I've said before, I want to tell you this, that the good news outweighs the bad news every day of the week for all of history, past and going forward. And it's not even close. It's not even close. It's not like a 51-49%. It's not a 60-40. It's like 99-1. As much bad stuff is happening, and there's plenty of bad, the good so far outweighs it if we can see it. Because as long as there's love, as long as love is being exchanged, which it is all the time, everywhere, love wins, hands down. It's love that carries us. It's love that we're in. Doesn't mean to dismiss or ignore or not care about the bad things because they need to be addressed. But open our eyes, God, to see the love that is everywhere. Because it is. And breathe deep into that reality. Because it will change your vision. It will help you understand. Which takes us into this blindness thing. That's a wacky thing to do, isn't it? Pray for everybody to be blind. Wouldn't you freak out if I prayed a prayer right now for the same thing to happen and you'd be blind right now? Should we try it? Well, let's not. But bad news, we're already kind of blind. Every one of us. We talk about this stuff around here, right? We all have our paradigms, our way of seeing the world that we did not necessarily choose ourselves. In fact, none of us chose our original paradigms ourselves, but they were given to us, gifted to us, because somebody who raised us and who was around us said, this has helped me make sense of the world. And so without even thinking about it, they just raised you up in this particular cosmology so you could make sense of the world. And it wasn't just your family of origin or those people who supported you. It was your culture that was informed by time and history and place. All these things wrapped together has given you your worldview. And in giving you that worldview, that particular way of seeing the world to help you survive, it comes with its own set of blinders. Your brain works that way on purpose, to see the things you need to see to help you survive and forget and discard and not even see the rest. We learned this a few weeks ago as part of the Quest for Spiritual Places. Remember that? Our Thin Places. And our brains actually have a function this way. And the author of that book gave us an example about how he went to buy a Honda CR-V and ended up getting a green Honda CR-V. And he was nervous about buying the green one because first he wanted a different color one, and then he wondered, gosh, am I going to be the only one who has a green Honda CR-V? I don't want to be the only one. What will people think of me? And then suddenly, because he was focused on Honda green CR-Vs, they all of a sudden started to pop up everywhere. Now, is this a miracle of God, that somehow God created more Honda green CR-Vs? Or was that function of his brain in that space where all of a sudden he could notice it, where they all were, where he was blind to them before? We are all blind, my friends, to a certain degree. The sooner we come to grips with that, the better. The news that you watch, the channels that you watch, they are giving you information, but they are also giving you a blindness to information that they are not sharing. This is the world that we live in. Being aware of that reality is very, very important. We're all blind to a certain degree. Then we get into this weird thing, and I spent just a moment in the text talking about it. Because a feast for enemies, that's not obvious. That's nothing we want to do, in fact. If I were to switch the question that I had you start with today and ask you, who do you really struggle to love? And who do you really struggle to like? And invited you to have them over for dinner tonight, you'd give me 100 reasons why you just couldn't make that happen. Because you don't want to. That's understandable. Which is why this is so profound and how different it is. It's like something in Elisha, and I loved what he said. You, king of Israel, didn't deliver these people into your hand. This is a gift to you. So what are you going to do with this thing, this gift? Why don't you gift it back, gift it forward, see what happens? It's like Elisha somewhere intuitively knew that shalom in this particular situation was going to win the day, and it was going to create peace. And for that season, it did. As the text said, they didn't attack. However, I asked the next question. What if peace doesn't last? And I took you through verse 23 in this particular chapter. And verse 24, the very next verse. In a new season, the king of Aram of Damascus was waging war against Israel. So do we look at that and say to ourselves, wow, I guess the feast didn't work. I guess there won't be any feasting in the future. If we do that, I think we make a mistake. Because for that day and that season, war stopped. And this also reminds us that even though as much as our country wants peace to be a one-and-done thing, that's just not how it works. It's something that has to be managed, perpetuated, fostered. I'm probably the only one in the room, but I have been known throughout my life to make an error, a mistake, and then not too long after that, realizing that I've made the mistake, made exactly the same mistake. Have any of you done the same thing? Of course you have, right. And your significant others or your closest friends or your parents have been sure to point that out. Didn't we just talk about this, and here you go again. I even tell myself this. All right, I can manage how much of this delicious food I'm going to eat. Nope. Every time there's delicious food in front of me, forget it. I'm toast. And then I pay for it every time I foul myself on that. It's just the way it is. All this tells us is that there's some more work to do here. We are people and complex creatures, and peace needs to be managed because we know that we also have a tendency to destroy, which is also based in our survival techniques. Get rid of the threat. But our opportunities for that, we mess those up a lot. All this comes back to this big question. what does all of this stuff have to do with following Jesus? Because we're a Jesus-following church. We care more about the fruit that is produced out of our following Jesus than the particulars of our belief statement. At the end of the day, I think that's what matters. Are we reflecting the rhythms of Jesus or not? Are we bringing more of the Jesus mentality into the world or not? Well, this has a lot to do with Jesus. One of the most challenging statements that he made in his Sermon on the Mount, which none of us really like, is he said, love your enemies. Love your enemies. Well, now that you have heard this story about Elisha, it should not be a surprise to you that this is not an original idea to Jesus. Do you think Jesus knew his Bible? Pretty good odds. Do you think he knew about this story that we just read? Pretty good odds. He probably also knew about a proverb, Proverb 25, that says, show kindness and mercy even to your enemies. If your enemy needs water, give them drink. If your enemy is hungry, give them food. And the proverb goes on to say, it'll be like heaping coals onto their head, causing them to recognize their shame and their eneminess. My enemy is showing me kindness and mercy. How's that going to mess with them? Paul, the Apostle Paul, quotes that in his letter to the Roman church centuries later. The same exact thing, because he knew that was a part of the deeper Jewish tradition. To love your enemies, as hard as it is. This is just the way it is. And this has everything to do with this holy currency that we're on to today, this gracious leadership. Now you're looking at me, and I'm the senior pastor of the church, and so, I'm, the top banana, here at Crosswalk. But I'm also elected by you and all that, so maybe I'm not. And you might think, well, you're a leader, Pastor Pete, so I'm glad you're talking about this stuff, but I'm not a leader. I'm here to tell you, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And you may fight back on that and say, I'm not even working anymore. I'm retired. I'm no longer a leader of anything. And I want to challenge your thinking on that today. You might say to yourself, I have a boss who I think is my leader, but I'm not that boss. I'm below that boss. You may be somebody who's really low on the totem pole wherever you work or go to school or whatever, and you might not think you're a leader. And I'm telling you, you are a leader. Because you're a leader of you. And you're a leader of how your interactions with people are going to go every day. And you and I have the choice. Are we going to be gracious in our leadership or not? It's not quite that binary. There's nuances for sure, but we'll play with the binary just because it's easier. I witnessed what gracious leadership looked like and its impact just Thursday night. I was in Florida for this pastor's conference thing, and Thursday night we all went out for a final dinner together at this cool restaurant. And one of the pastors who was there, as we're going into the restaurant, he sees an employee that's holding the door for him. And the pastor, being a gracious leader, says to the guy, hey, thank you. How's your day going? And the employee looked at him and said, sometimes I get people asking me that at the end of the night, but I've never had anybody ask me as they're coming into the restaurant. Now, what do you think that did to that guy? It probably put a little brightness in his day, right? I wonder how that affected him and the rest of his evening and how he waited on other people in the restaurant. I have a hunch that shalom shown to him, that love shown to him, probably increased the capacity for shalom and love for that guy going forward. And I want to tell you that all the exchanges that we have that same capacity. You don't have to think about massive, huge things that you're going to do in your gracious leadership. You don't have to start the next movement. But how you start the next conversation could make all the difference. How you receive the words from somebody who may be coming at you sideways could make all the difference. Our normal reaction if somebody comes at us is to go sideways right back. And by the way, we all struggle with this. But what if in that moment we have presence of mind and we remember, I have the capacity of gracious leadership. So I'm just going to turn this thing in a different direction. Or if you're in a setting around a table, be it at work or family or whatever, and you hear some really dark stuff happening that's just not going well and it's not making anything better, It's not even just venting, which is a good thing, but it's getting ugly quick and othering people, which makes us feel more powerful and dehumanizes them. Maybe you in that gracious leadership opportunity is to just step in and say, I think we can do better here. Because those people that we're talking about, they're just like us. They're made in the image of God just like us. They're loved just like us. And I wonder what the loving move is toward remedying this. How do we heal this? Because we know that God is always about shalom, that God may be shalom, that God comes from shalom, is headed toward shalom, and the means between those two things is always shalom, or love if you want that. How can we be a part of the current with our gracious leadership? So I want to talk about a couple of lunches. First lunch was about me and a guy at this conference. So last year I presented, that was as a 3-year thing, and year 2 is you present something to this group of pastors that you think might be helpful. And so I think the title of mine was How to Lead a Church Through a Lot of Change Without Getting Fired. Something like that. Because there's so many opportunities that I probably should have been fired. And frankly, I so value you because anytime I tell the story of Crosswalk, almost without fail, especially if it's a pastor, they will say back to me, what's happened at Crosswalk is rare. Because usually they blow up for all the reasons that should have gotten me fired. And of course, when I started the presentation, I realized that from a regional thing, I did get fired. So maybe I wasn't the right guy to be given the conversation. But in part of the story, I shared some of the bigger blows, some of the bigger things that we did. And one of the biggest moves that we made was to become welcoming and affirming of LGBTQ neighbors. And just recognize that they are just as shalomed up by God as anybody else. And same gender covenant is blessed by God, I believe. And so for those who are more on the evangelical conservative side, that was disconcerting, to say the least. This guy who I was going to end up having lunch with was one of those guys who struggled with this reality because it doesn't fit how he sees and understands scriptures. And so on Monday morning, we're just catching up, and we both said to each other, knowing that we are on different sides of some hot issues, we said, man, it'd be nice if we could carve out some time to take a shot at dialogue. Instead of talking over each other, just have a real conversation. And then we got separated because other people were talking to us and stuff. And the next morning, we found each other, and we both figured out, hey, we've got an opportunity here. Let's give this thing a shot. And so we decided Tuesday of last week to have this lunch. So we found a table for 2. On the beach didn't hurt anything either. And we had a long lunch, about 2.5 hours. And it was largely him wanting to know my story and why I shifted from a more evangelical understanding of this issue and other issues about God to where I am now. And it actually helped him to know that I really did understand that other space because I lived in it. I could make the argument as good as he could, but then talked about some things, some of which I'm sure he'd heard before, and a couple pieces I'm sure he'd never heard before, based on his response. The bigger underlying question that we had through this whole thing was how in the world, in our very diverse denomination, American Baptist Churches USA, we are one of the, if not the most diverse denomination in the world. I mean, it is crazy how diverse we are. And the big question is, well, that's wonderful, but how do we get along? Is it possible for us to live under the same tent? And we both agreed that in order for that to happen, it would require significant maturity and humility for us on all sides to recognize that God is actually working through all of us at all times. And that's hard because we want to go binary. And I want to say, we have the truth. And that church down the street doesn't know what they're talking about. And guess what's happening at that church down the street? Same thing. And I told him, as much as it drives me a little bit crazy, that I have to admit, I can't deny that some of the churches that have, said bad things about me and us from their places of humanity, that God is still working through them. God is still working through them. And he had to admit, because of what's happening here, God is working in this space. And I pushed him a little further. This one he didn't like as much, but had to say that, globally, other faith traditions, if God really is love, if God is truly interested in everybody understanding the profound nature of love and what that can do to change us, transform us, reconcile us, restore us, and that means God must be working through other faith traditions as well. That's the only way we get to peace. That's the only way we can live with each other under the same umbrella, is keep appealing to that thing which may be very confounding to us, even if it's true. So that was one lunch. And then another lunch I want to tell you about, and that we both felt great about it, by the way. Like, we experienced this gracious leadership, and we both walked away feeling somewhat hopeful, even though it's daunting, and left feeling like we're friends. And he needed to know, by the way, that I have dear friends who are evangelical. One of my friends lived right down the highway in Vallejo. He was a pastor there for forever. And he and I were dear friends, even though he did not agree with my theological interpretation of a lot of things. And I didn't agree with his. But we loved each other. And he needed to hear that. Well, a not-so-lovely lunch was one that Jesus had. And I don't know what he was doing up there. Maybe he was on vacation. It was Memorial Day or something. And he went up to this region called Sidon, which is just north of Israel. And it's kind of a beach community. And he's there hanging out with the guys, I imagine, and they're having tacos. And this woman comes to him, a Syro-Phoenician woman, because that's her area that she's from. And she recognizes him. TikTok video or something, I'm not sure, but recognizes him and knows that he's a healer. And she's got a problem. Her daughter's very sick. We're not sure what it was. They called it demon possession, but that could be any number of things from, could be something that's causing her to go into convulsions. It could be a mental health crisis. We're not exactly sure what's going on. So she goes at him and says, "Sir, I beg of you, please consider healing my daughter." And at that point, Jesus basically uses the N-word on her. No kidding. Now, we don't quite catch this because, one, the commentators don't want to admit that that's what Jesus just did. And two, the words don't have the same punch to us because of our time and place. He basically called her a dog, which for us, if by that you mean a Labrador Retriever, thank you very much. Who doesn't love a Labrador Retriever? They're wonderful. Or my little grand dog in San Francisco. Call me Indy any day of the week. No problem. I'm complimented by that and all of his faithfulness and loveliness and snuggliness and all that stuff. But if you're a Jew living in that day and age, this was the worst insult you could possibly levy. And it came out of Jesus' mouth. You're a dog. Why would I waste anything on a dog like you? You know what the Syrophoenician woman did? She pulled off gracious leadership. And she said straight back to Jesus, "But don't the dogs even receive crumbs off the table?" And that statement, rather than stomping off, rather than throwing water in his face or slapping him or whatever, it changed Jesus. He learned his own lesson that day. And what does he do? He swallows hard. It's like, oh my goodness, what have I said? What is in front of me right now? And he just simply said to her, well said, well played, you're right. Your daughter is well. Go home in peace. And the daughter was well. Crazy to think that our own Jesus struggled with the very same things that you and I do. It's almost as if he was a real human being or something. Now, he learned something from that because later on in the Gospel of John, now the Gospel of John doesn't care about timeline as much. It's more interested in theology than Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those Gospels. And so the timeline may be a little bit off, but in John chapter 4, you have Jesus. He's down in the southern part, what used to be known as the Kingdom of Judah, He's probably down for a festival at Jerusalem. And he wants to get back to his homeland, which is the Sea of Galilee area, which is the north part where you saw Israel. And most of the people wanted to take a route which took longer up by the Jordan River and kind of follow that all the way up. But Jesus said to his disciples, we have to go through Samaria. Nobody had to go through Samaria. But Jesus says we have to because of what was going to unfold. They find themselves at this historical well, and Jesus sent the guys into town to get some burgers, and he stayed there at the well. And here comes this woman in the heat of the day, traveling alone to gather water. That alone signals to any ancient reader something's up, because no woman travels alone, and nobody in their right mind comes in the heat of the day. You travel in groups before dawn, so you get back, and you're in the company of others for safety, and now you've got your water. So Jesus is putting things together. What does Jesus do? He strikes up you know the story, strikes up a conversation with her, which was a total gracious leadership move. Because as a rabbi and a Jewish man, you don't do that. She's playing defense. She's like, you shouldn't even be talking to me like this. And Jesus keeps making bids, keeps trying to be gracious. He realizes what her story is, tells her what that story is, and she's uncomfortable. She tries to get him off track, throws a theological argument at him that she knew that every Jewish person would take the bait of. And instead of taking the bait about where are we supposed to worship and how, Jesus just simply says, well, you know, the reality is that people who are really loving God just love God in spirit and the truth. It doesn't really matter where it is, because God's spirit, and God is spirit and truth. That changed her life. She went back to the very village that rejected her, that wouldn't let her walk with the other woman, or made it so hostile that she didn't want to. And somehow this woman who nobody listened to, she convinced the whole village to come listen to Jesus. She became the gracious leader. And they all came, and instead of running the disciples out of town, they welcomed them to stay for multiple nights. It's crazy what one act of gracious leadership can do. And so my question for you is, what's your next gracious leadership move? It might happen on your way out of the parking lot when Becky Joe Peterson cuts you off on the way to the stoplight. You know what you're going to be tempted to do. But maybe now, instead of waving the bird, you're just waving a hand in the air. I don't know what it might be. Maybe you're going to be really hungry because I'm going a little long. And so you're going to go to the restaurant and you're going to want to, be a little grumpy. But maybe you're going to remember Elisha. Maybe you're going to remember Jesus. You're going to remember you have the currency of gracious leadership to spend. And maybe you can be the person that changes that whole trajectory. Or maybe you're grumpy today and you're really in need of a nap because you lost an hour of sleep, and the people you're doing life with, somebody does something wrong because they're people, and you have that opportunity right then. Gracious or ungracious? What's it going to be? But do you see the opportunity before us? You see the beauty before us? This opportunity to extend grace, shalom, loveliness, wherever we can be. So to close this down, I do have one song that we're going to get to eventually, but I want our resident meditation teacher to come up and lead us through a loving kindness meditation, which is at the front end really easy, and then it gets really difficult. Take it away, Dave.
So much good stuff. And it's fun. We usually do the meditation before, and so I'm sitting there the whole time and said, "Oh yeah," as Pete's doing the teaching. That's a great connection. That's a great connection. But this time I got to hear it. I can say many great connections to what I wanted to talk about. I won't detail those, but I just wanted to focus on the part where in a lot of the traditions, and certainly in Jesus' tradition, and the Jewish tradition, which I didn't know, this idea of love and practicing love as a spiritual practice shows up again and again and again. And so I want to lean into that part as a practice. That word practice, when we use spiritual practice, it really has for me, the same meaning that it has in any other kinds of practice, be it tennis or learning Spanish. It's something we do because we want to get better at it. And so we have a practice for loving kindness. And I think, for me, that's huge. That's huge to know we have these practices. So that's what I want to lead us in that. And you can take away what resonates with you about it, especially in the words as you go through your week. Just thinking, are there words here that I could use to anchor that, to anchor myself in the loving kindness in this moment, with somebody cutting me off on the way out the parking lot in this moment. So we're going to go through quite a few words about it, and just think about that. See if you can take away some words that you could use to anchor, to bring loving kindness into your space, into your heart, and into your body. So that's what we're going to practice now. So I'm going to do a little different for me, which is we're going to start with mindfulness. That part's not a little different, but just to sort of clear our space. And then I'm going to do a couple of readings, one from Luke and one from one of Buddha's sutras, both about practicing loving kindness. And so while I'm reading those, just sort of let's use that as a sort of intro into this idea of just having loving kindness in our heart, in our space, in our mind, in our body. And just lean into those words. And then we're going to do what we've done before, is a more structured loving kindness, cultivating loving kindness meditation. So let's just start by, I always find the easiest way in any given moment to bring myself into the moment is to focus on sensory information, because there's always all this sensory information coming in. And I'll use some examples to show you what I mean, but you can close your eyes if that's easier for you, or keep your eyes open with a soft gaze. And just focus on your feet right now, your feet on the floor, and all that sensory information coming in from your feet. This is such a great way to bring ourselves easily into the moment and fluidly. Just say, I'm just feeling my feet right now. And feeling my heel and the pressure on the floor of my heel and the ball of my foot. Feeling all that information coming from my toes and the nerve endings there. And I'm feeling my seat on the chair. You can notice just where your sit bones are, how much more pressure there is there than sort of the sides of your legs. There's temperature too, maybe warmer where you're touching the chair and cooler when you're not. You can feel the air more. And then just overall sort of feel into your whole body and just notice if there's any tensions or tinglings, other places you feel your body touching. And as I said, I'm going to start here with Luke. These are Jesus' words, very much in line with the teaching. And as our goal here is to sort of take a moment, know that we can take a beat at any moment and invite, cultivate, open up to whatever words work. Loving kindness. It's always there for us. Love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High, for he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. And then the meditation we're going to do in a moment is from this sutra of the Buddha. It's an instruction on how to practice loving kindness. So wishing other people. In gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. May beings all live happily and safe, and may their hearts rejoice within themselves. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, may all beings be at ease. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded. So now we have the cultivating meditations. And what we do with these is we say words, almost like a chant. We find the words that most resonate with us, because again, we're inviting in loving kindness. So let's start with ourselves, and the words will be a little different when we do it for other people. But just for a heads up, we're going to do it for ourselves, a loved one, a neutral person, and then somebody we find difficult. So for ourselves, say to yourself after me, and again, feeling into the words, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be safe and healthy. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. And now bring into your mind and heart a loved one. Somebody who you just feel that love for them on a daily basis. It could even be a pet. And thinking of that person, as I say, we're going to change the words and simplify them. Just say to that person in your mind, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. May you be happy. Now think of a person who you know, perhaps, but don't have any particularly strong feelings about. A neighbor, a barista, or your coffee shop. And picturing them expanding this circle of loving kindness. Say to them in your mind, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. May you be happy. And the words say love your enemies. The words say love all living things. And it turns out that when we bring that to somebody who makes us angry, who makes us sad, it becomes sort of a whole nother meditation. But let's practice that, just to see what that's like, without judgment. So bring somebody to mind. It could be a public figure. It could be somebody you're struggling with in your life. And visualizing them. And again, just with acceptance, love, and lack of judgment, say to them, May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. May you be happy. Now let's relax back into loving kindness as an experience in our body, in our heart. Just for a couple of breaths, sit and imagine ourselves radiating kindness over the entire world. Oh, I was supposed to do a promotional piece before, but with the meditation class at 11:30 today in the small conference room. Thank you.
We're going to finish off our service